don't get down on yourself when you don't get the role that you want, because that's just one person's opinion. And so who knows if they're actually smarter, if they're actually good at what they do. They're just probably older than you. So I think persevere through that. Don't get down on yourself. It's okay to be disappointed, obviously, but like take a night and then get over it and look for what's next after that.
Welcome back to Rerouted, where we explore unique career paths to give you the tools you need to create the life you want. Today, I'm talking with Aneesh Ramamoorthy, founder and CEO of edtech startup Learvo. Aneesh graduated with a degree in marketing from University of Illinois in 2019, but ended up working in sales. He later pivoted to product management, one of the most sought-after tech roles, and is now building Learvo full-time. In the episode, we talk about the value in working at a startup while working in corporate, especially as a young professional, his way to breaking into one of the most sought-after positions on the market, and his advice for fresh grads and startup founders. Fair warning, at some point in the episode, the lights in the building I'm in will get shut off, and I will be left in the literal dark, but let's get into it. Aneesh, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
All right, I want to start. Can you just give me a brief overview of what Learvo is and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm one of the founders at Learvo. We're an education startup. So we're building a personalized learning assistant. What we're really trying to do is make learning fun and motivating for students. Really, scientifically, the brain likes to learn. It enjoys learning. Just the education system sucks the fun out of it. And so really what our mission is trying to make learning more fun, more motivating, more enjoyable for everyone, but students in particular. One of the main ways that we're doing that is by personalizing it to them, personalizing it to how they learn, what they care about, how much they've actually learned. And then, we add in gamification and social learning just to make the learning experience, again, more fun and motivating for students.
Can you tell me about your first startup experience in college?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I went to the University of Illinois, just like you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great school, especially for the startup community. I didn't know that going in, but it definitely is. And I found this startup the beginning of my senior year. There's an event at Illinois called Social Fuse, where students go there and pitch their startup, looking to find co-founders and other team members for their startup. And so my co-founder, Elijah, pitched his startup, and we built two products, one pre-COVID, one post-COVID. But the first product we built was an event platform for college students. So we were finding that there were a lot of events on campus that people wanted to know about from different types of what we called event providers. And so like that could be the school, or the different colleges within the school, businesses on campus, student groups and organizations. There's a lot of events, but no one knew how to find them, where to find them. And so we built this app to help students find events on campus. We pivoted during COVID, and I can talk about that, but it was a great learning experience. We were part of the iVenture Accelerator program at the University of Illinois. So for those of you that go to school that are listening, look up that program, try to talk to them, try to get into the program. It's a great learning experience. But yeah, that was kind of how I got into the startup world. I was originally a marketing major. I was entrepreneurship and marketing. I kind of always knew I wanted to do startups and entrepreneurships. I just didn't know how, what, or why. So I figured marketing would be my domain in to business and to startups. I figured out through that startup as we were building the product that product management was what I was much better at, much more interested in, and I pivoted to that eventually. But that's kind of a brief overview of the first startup experience.
Okay, so let's talk about then your not product management role right out of college. What'd you do?
Yeah, so my first role out of college was in sales. So I was working at the startup and my first job full time, both pretty much. But yeah, I was a BDR, business development representative at Oracle, and it was one of the best experience, like I think, jobs out of college, because sales, it's not something that everyone wants to do, but and it's not something that I wanted to do per se. I was trying to get marketing jobs out of college, and I just couldn't get any. But it was a great learning experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything as for my first job, because it teaches you a lot of skills that you need no matter what you're trying to do in life, right? You're always trying to sell something, sell yourself, sell your ideas, sell your company, maybe, and so it was a great learning experience, and I love that job.
What's the timeline look like in terms of when you were working on your first startup, when you were working at Oracle?
Yeah, absolutely. So I joined that startup the beginning of my senior year. So this would have been September of 2018, somewhere around then. And we were part of the accelerator program the summer after I graduated. So that would have been, June, July, August of 2019. My first job started in October of 2019. So was doing that startup, pretty much the whole time I was at that first job too. And even into my second job in product, I was still doing the startup for a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of the timeline.
Okay. Then let's talk about the second job now. Tell me about how you product is pretty highly sought after, I would say, in terms of tech roles. So tell me about your pivot to product, especially from sales and having a
Absolutely.
non-technical background from
Yeah.
your educational experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like I said, I joined that first startup as a marketing person, kind of ended up being the head of marketing, but that's what, yeah, like I said, that's what I thought I wanted to do. And my co-founder Elijah, he kind of realized it in me first. He was a couple years older than me, had been in tech for a little bit, so he kind of knew the tech world a lot better than I did. And I was doing a good amount of product, and I didn't even realize it. I didn't know it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey, maybe you should try this out." And he just kind of gave me a couple tasks, and then I just kind of ran with it and fell in love with it. And so I transitioned to the head of product. That really solidified when COVID hit. And
Mm-hmm.
so when COVID hit, events were no longer a thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
we had to take a step back and figure out what we wanted to do. Did we want to wait out COVID? Did we want to pivot? Was there another option? So we really took a step back, and we did end up pivoting, and that's really when I took over the reins for product, because the second product we built was really related to my college experience at my fraternity. So basically what we built when COVID hit was it was an app for student organizations to have better oversight over their members, and specifically the events that their organization puts on, but also have better communication with them. And so I was an exec member at my fraternity. And so a lot of that experience came from, or a lot of the thought process behind that idea came from that experience. And I can dive deeper into that if you want. But so yeah,
Actually, I am curious about how your experience in the fraternity and just as a college student, a little more
Mhm.
broadly, has influenced the directions that you've brought your startups.
I think it's generally a good idea to build a product that you need or
Mm-hmm.
needed at some point. Maybe it was in the past. And so yeah, when we took a step back, we did a lot of interviews too. And I think that's a theme that we'll probably talk about is the importance I place on customer discovery. So it wasn't just solely based off my experience, but when we did all those interviews, I realized that a lot of student organizations had similar challenges that we did. And so just to talk about a few of those challenges, we were a social fraternity, but we had to get stuff done. We were also in a working relationship, you could say, within our exec team, and we were all best friends, but we were also in a working relationship, which is an interesting dynamic. But
Mm-hmm.
there were times where we wanted to have fun, but there was also times that we had to be serious. And I think the kids probably still use the GroupMe today. I'm not sure exactly,
Yeah.
but GroupMe was the main app that we used. And we had 50 different channels, and we had a general channel where anyone can talk, right? We had channels for different committees and different interests, but the non-serious messages got mixed in with the serious messages, especially when kids are having fun and going out, right? And so exec members always had a challenge of when they said something serious, not a lot of people saw it. We also never had a great picture of who was coming to our events
Mm.
and how many people were coming, because yeah, we just have people like heart a message, but sometimes people heart it just to promote it or just to say that they saw it, or
Mm-hmm.
they think that they're going to come but end up something happens or they change their mind. And so it didn't really matter what type of event it was. It could have been chapter, it could have been a social event, it could have been a study session, so it was kind of a common challenge. And so going back to the interviews and customer discovery, I realized that a lot of a lot of student organizations had very similar challenges. And so my experience definitely influenced that, but we got that feedback that this was a common problem. And so that's why we decided, like, hey, we think this is a good idea. We should try this out. So that's kind of why we that combined with the fact that COVID hit and events were no longer a thing and we needed to figure out what we wanted to do next. That's why we pivoted.
So I want to learn a little bit as well about how you pivoted to product, not just in your startup, but then also for a job outside of the startup. Can you tell me a bit about that, what that looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was doing sales, right? And I loved the learning and growth of that. But I didn't love the day to day.
Sure.
I knew I didn't want to do sales forever. And so as soon as I figured out that I was good at product, I started looking for what product roles were out there. And so I was obviously junior, pretty fresh out of college. I think I was 22 or 23 years old when I got my first corporate role in product. But yeah, it was pretty much just, my co-founder Elijah, he kind of figured it out in me that product was what I was good at. I took over product. I led the kind of product direction for the company, for the pivot, as well as I led our customer discovery team. So we had a team of students that did interviews as well as me. We had a design team, so I led the design team in terms of building out the product from the design front end side. And then I worked with Elijah and our TTO from on the technical side to build out the product, right? So that was my transition within the startup. And then once I realized that, I just started looking what was out there. This could be a good little tip for those looking to break into product, but also maybe any other role that they may be too young for. I saw a job that said associate product manager, and I applied for that, and I didn't get it, but I actually had a shot at that. For all the other product manager jobs I applied for, I just never heard back because a lot of those wanted 3 to 5 years of experience, and I had maybe a couple months at that
Mm.
point. And so but once I figured out the word associate, I looked that up, and then there were a lot of jobs. And then, when I applied for those, I got one in very short amount of time. And so, but yeah, when I interviewed for Minted, which was my first company that I worked at in product, or my first, non-startup, I worked in product. They asked me a lot about the startup experience, and so they pretty much, wanted me after that. So
It seems like that's kind of it's an interesting route to take where it's like you don't necessarily have the experience, but by doing the startup, you've kind of created your own experience. It's something, would you say that if just in general trying to break into any sort of tech role is maybe like an end goal is having sort of like an intermediate startup phase, like a good idea? What do you think on that?
absolutely. That would be my advice to young people because I think, especially with AI, entry level jobs are going to be tough. There's not a lot of skills that young people out of school have that AI can't do better than them. And so not only are they competing against the AI, but they're also competing against all of their peers and just everyone in their age level for those little roles that are out there. And so I think two parts. One, yeah, like I think just to get experience, and trying to figure out what you're good at. That's part of the startup experience that I had. And for the college team members that I have at Learvo right now, I try to give them that experience as well, where I'll give them feedback on what they're good at, what they're not good at. I'll tell them about roles that they don't know about because
Mm.
you just haven't been in tech, so you just don't know about these types of roles. And I'll kind of coach them, and I'll continually ask them, what type of role they see themselves into, what they're liking about what they're doing and what they're not doing. And I'll try to give them experience and skills and tasks within those areas. And so, just I think one part of it is finding what you're good at and getting experience in that. And then trying to find roles based off that, based off what you feel like you're good at and what you're interested in doing. So that's the first big piece. I think the second big piece is definitely a little bit of what I touched on earlier, just competing against the AI. It's the entry level jobs. There's just not going to be a lot out there because AI can do a lot of what entry level roles can do and just the experience that they have. And so they need to get experience some other way. And so joining a startup is a great way to do that, is to just get experience, to have that 3 to 5 years of experience that a lot of job roles are requiring.
I've also heard too that 3 to 5 years of corporate experience can often be pressed down to even just a few months as in a startup. Would you say that, have you seen that for either the people that you're mentoring yourself, just being able to
It,
learn like so much more?
For sure, I think it depends on them and how much time they're willing to put into it. But I've
Mm.
definitely seen that for sure. That those that are, yeah, that put in the time, they get what they want out of it sooner than others do, for sure. Yeah, I think jobs and people giving jobs and interviewing for or interviewing folks to get jobs, there's a lot of it's arbitrary. There's a lot of bias involved. And, I think one advice I'd also give is don't get down on yourself when you don't get the role that you
Mm.
want, because that's just one person's opinion. And so who knows if they're actually smarter, if they're actually good at what they do. They're just probably older than you. So I think persevere through that. Don't get down on yourself. It's okay to be disappointed, obviously, but like, take a night and then get over it and look for what's next after that. But yeah, I mean, the job industry, it's an interesting one just because, yeah, like it's one person's opinion. Maybe it's a couple people's opinion, but who knows if they're actually know what they're even doing.
Yeah. I want to highlight as well, you're saying that, not being too upset if you don't get what you want, highlighting once again your own journey of not getting a marketing job, instead going sales. And now you've found yourself on this really fulfilling path, which, believe it or not, might actually be the point of this podcast to some extent. But it's, you found yourself on a fulfilling path and discovering what you want to do outside of that corporate role as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Because I was trying really hard to get marketing roles, and I was trying to take advantage of like family contacts and just anyone who could try to get me a role in advertising or marketing. And so I interviewed with a couple. Or I don't know if you call it an interview, maybe job shadowed is a better way of saying it. With a couple advertising agencies in LA, and we almost moved there. Me and my girlfriend almost moved there out of college, and I'm so thankful that didn't happen because also we would have known it. We wouldn't have known anyone. We ended up, I ended up getting that sales role in Chicago, so we were able to be with a lot of our friends out of school. And so, but yeah, had I gotten one or that family friend had given me that job, even though I probably didn't earn it, they could have just given it to me. And I'm very thankful that they didn't because that led me down the path of product. And maybe I would have still, because I wouldn't have given up the startup. So maybe I still would have figured that out. But the experience and the learning experiences of sales, there's still a lot of that I use today as a founder. There's a lot of skills that I learned that apply to what I do today, and I think will apply for what I do forever. Whether I'm a founder forever or I go back to corporate at any point. I think there are skills in sales that I'm so thankful for that I learned that even though I didn't like them in the moment, I so thankful that I went through that.
So now I want to move to, we've talked about your early career with sales, with product. I want to talk about the initial days of Learvo. Can you tell me a little bit about, I want to know a little bit towards the tail end of the startup that you were doing before, and then kind of how Learvo came about, how you ended up leaving. I know I just said through a lot at you, but I want to know this timeline. I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as soon as I'd done the startup for a couple more months after I'd gotten the product role, but at that point we were kind of fizzling out.
Mm.
Um, and so I was, yeah, and so I was just kind of the product role at Minted. I was kind of focused on that for a while, and then I got another role at PayPal. So I started working at PayPal, and around that time that I started, I think a few months into my PayPal role, ChatGPT had come out. So now we're
Mm.
in November, December of 22, I believe. Maybe someone can
Yeah.
fact check me on that. But and that opened up a lot of possibilities, as I'm sure a lot of people had that ChatGPT moment of when they realized what that could do. I had the idea for, I guess, the seed idea of Learvo back when I was in high school. I was the student that needed this product. And so I had the idea back in high school, but I never thought it would be technically possible until ChatGPT came out. And then after a few days of playing around with it and reading everything I could on it, I realized that this idea that I had that I thought about, here and there, especially as I was a student, it was now technically possible. And so I was strongly considering this, and uh, I started doing interviews. I started getting feedback on it, and I can talk about that as well. And I'm not that surprised that this happened. But then PayPal did layoffs, and so I was, I was not in that job for very long, so I wasn't super surprised that I was part of that. But that, I think, was a blessing in disguise because I knew I'd gotten enough feedback that I knew there was something here. This just made it a lot easier for me to convince my dad and my parents that I should go after this full time, because I had done the two jobs at the same time thing, and while I for someone straight fresh out of college, I would suggest that because you do need that corporate grounding, in my opinion, or that 9 to 5 grounding. But now that
Mhm.
I've been through that for 3, 4, 5 years at that point, and I had the confidence that I could always get back there, and I still have that confidence. But yeah, it was just a lot easier to convince my parents that now was the right time to do this. And so I convinced my girlfriend to move to San Francisco to pursue this. And yeah, that was kind of the origin stories, I guess, for leaving the corporate world and starting the startup.
I want to follow up on something you mentioned about the idea of like that corporate grounding. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think I had always fantasized about doing a startup, and I'd always tell my dads like during the internships through my college years, like I don't like this, like I want to do my own company. And he's like, you don't even have an idea, like you don't know what the world's like out there. And I'm like, I'll figure it out. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think he was right in terms of just that first role out of school. You just kind of you don't know what the real world is like. In college, especially at the University of Illinois, which is a great university, you're in a bubble, whether you like it or not. And so, uh, just I think that the reps of the 9 to 5 is a transition because as a college student, and especially as a senior, you're probably staying up late, waking up late. You schedule your classes around that, especially that last semester where people are chilling. You got your job already, so you don't really need to worry about anything. So, yeah, I just think that the reps of the 9 to 5, you learn a lot about yourself during that, and also just how to work with people. Really, this is your first extended experience of that. You may have had an internship for 3 months, but 3 months is nothing in the real world. It's that 9 to 5, and it's as well as it's working with people.
You've talked a lot about the idea of customer discovery and then also these interviews that you've done. Can you walk me through? I just want the step by step of how you've from ideation to starting to build a product, how you're validating that and then looking to start getting your first customers. That's something that I'm very curious about.
Absolutely. This would be my suggestion for every single startup, unless maybe if you're D-Tech, I'm sure there's exceptions. And also, I'm talking about software. That's what I know. So if you're doing
Hmm.
something hardware related, you may want to look for startup advice. I guess maybe elsewhere, but maybe it applies. I'm not sure. I want to be clear that startup is what, or sorry, software is what I know.
Hmm.
And so I think before you touch a line of code, you should have done 50 interviews at least. You should be validating the solution you think you might have. But I think it's really important to not validate the solution like the first question out of the gate. And
Hmm.
I've made this mistake before, so this is coming from experience. You can definitely have the solution in your mind. You can definitely think like, okay, this is the right solution. But it's really important for the target demographic that you're potentially going after and or are interviewing to ask them what their problems are, ask them what their challenges are, ask them about their day to day, ask them about other questions related to your idea without hinting at your idea, without telling them what the idea is. And that's how you really validate that this idea could be a problem that is worth solving. I think that's probably one of the most important pieces, like making sure that you're solving the right problem, and then
Hmm.
also validating that there's someone there that will potentially pay for it. And I think that's what those two things are really important. And I see that mistake all the time, especially out here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where a lot of startups are engineering driven, which engineers are great, but they not a lot of them don't like to talk to customers. And so um, or they make the mistake of starting to build a tech, and the tech is cool, probably, right? But it doesn't matter if no one wants to use it, or if no one needs to use it if you're not solving a problem. And so that's why I think it's really important to do interviews to begin with. I think it's also really important to continue to do interviews no matter where you are at in the product development lifecycle. I think it's important to do interviews before you, once you have a design, you probably have a designer or a design team that you'll do the front end designs. And then I think it's important to validate after that, like, hey, does this solution look good? Is this solving the problem that you told me that you had? Do you think you're going to pay for this or someone else is going to pay for this? Is there anything confusing about this experience? Would you know what to do when you got onto this, when you open the app and this is what you see, right? Or you open the website and this is what you see. And so it's important to bring them along in that journey, because sometimes, even the people that you interview, they don't always know what they want. And I think this is a Steve Jobs ethos, I believe, but showing the users what they want before they know that they want it, that is also part of it, I think. But I believe it's important to validate the problem, validate the solution, validate that someone's going to pay for it, and bring them along in the product development lifecycle, no matter where you're at. So even if once you're past the design cycle, in the engineered cycle, right? Maybe it's not ready to be live yet, but you have a prototype that someone could play around with. Show them that prototype. Get feedback as soon as possible, because your first idea most likely will be not good enough. Your first iteration, your first V1 of what you release will most likely not be good enough. And so, that's okay. If maybe it's good enough to get some usage, but not good enough to find product market fit, which is a goal for all startups, right? Is to find product market fit. And so you want to continually validate no matter how long you've been out in the market. And I think I see a lot of corporate companies not do this. And both of my corporate experiences, I didn't do a single interview. I didn't talk to a single customer. And I think that was a mistake, because I was making prioritization decisions just almost solely based off gut. Definitely a lot of data, which I think is also really important to make product decisions on. But some of it was just gut. And I think that's great too. I think to be a great product manager, you need to have taste, which is probably used a lot nowadays with AI, especially, but taste, and you got to just know a lot about the customer. But I just didn't, I never was forced to do any interviews. And even there were, UX researchers and UX folks that did interviews that I would maybe see a recording of, but that'll only take you so far, And so I think it's also important that corporate companies do this. And I think hopefully it's a startup, hopefully it's Learvo, whatever startup that we're able to turn corporate. I want to continue doing interviews. And you see some companies do this now. Like I think Stripe, I heard that they make their entire exec team do interviews. And like, it doesn't matter if you're in product, right? I think they said that their CFO does interviews. And so I think that's awesome for them. And I think that's probably a reason why that they're so successful, is that they know the customer, and not just one functionality, right? Not just product, not just the CEO. They have all functionalities doing interviews and knowing the customer. So that helps the team also know what the problems are, but then be collective in their vision and what they're trying to accomplish on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis.
What you're describing, are you familiar with the term human-centered design process?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Because that was what's clicking for me, was that term human-centered design. So would you say that's like a concise way to kind of summarize your mindset or the process of doing the interviews, identifying that you're doing the correct problem, and then that you have the correct solution to an extent?
I think so. I'd probably have to refresh myself on the specifics of the process. I think so. I'd have to refresh myself a little bit more on that.
Sure. But that's a quick buzzword that you can, or not a buzzword,
Mm-hmm.
that's not fair to say. I love human-centered
Yeah.
design, but that's a quick term that you can search up. Okay. So now you've got a team with Learvo. You've kind of transitioned from just, you've got your idea, you've validated your product, you've started building your product. I want to know, have there been any struggles, kind of like, or just struggles or key moments of resistance that you faced as you're starting to go from that, now you've got an idea or even maybe a first product, to now building out a team and leading that team?
For sure. Yeah. I think this is something that I've learned early on, is that in the startup world, and even corporate, honestly, you see this a lot with Meta nowadays, but recruitment never ends. I think that is one of the roles of the CEO, is to recruit the best talent you possibly can. That's especially hard for us as an early stage startup, and we don't have a lot of funding. We have some, but not a lot. And so that is especially difficult, when you can't pay someone what they're worth and you have to be upfront about that, right? And
Hmm.
but yeah, I think recruitment is something that never ends. And so you're always looking for the best talent, and it doesn't matter, what the functionality is, right? Engineering is definitely something that I'll always need, not having a technical background myself. And so, recruiting engineering talent and potential co-founders, right? Recruiting, marketing talent, and there'll be like we don't have any HR people, but I'm sure at some point we'll need to recruit HR people, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, I think that was a learning lesson that I had, is that recruitment never ends, especially when you're in this for the long run, because life comes up, right? People go through stuff, and people don't always stick around, even though they may want to. And a lot of times, people may not want to, right? They find a different opportunity that they'd rather do. And so I think that is an important lesson for startups, is to potentially have a backup plan in terms of, hey, like, what if this person, what if something happens, right? What if they leave? What if, something personal happens and they just can't work for a while, or they can't continue, right? So I think that's just something to have in the back of your mind, and maybe have a backup plan in terms of that. But especially for an early stage startup, when you can't recruit the best people with money like Meta can, you have to figure out some other way to recruit them, right? And so that's where I think the mission comes in play, right? What are we doing this for? What's our cause? What's our long term vision? What's going to change when we do become a driving force in the world? And for us, education, I think you have to have that messaging and that mission, so that you can recruit the best talent, and not only the best talent, the talent that is motivated by your mission. Because even the best talent, if they're not motivated by what you're trying to accomplish, they're probably not the best fit for the team.
Hmm.
And they may not put in their all. They may hold other team members back. And so I think it's important to also find people that fit your culture and fit your long-term vision and mission of the company.
Okay. Okay. I want to bounce us back a little bit. Um, uh, but I want to know, so when you left PayPal, not intentionally, and were starting to go all in on Learvo, how did you survive? Did you have some savings built up? Were you doing some other stuff? What did that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a combo of savings. Actually, yeah, it's pretty much all savings. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd worked for a couple years, 3, 4 years now. I had always, I'd lived when I was with college. I lived with 4 of my college friends, so 5 of us in a little house. I had lived at home for a year during COVID, so that definitely helped the bank account. And so, yeah, it was pretty much all savings.
Now we're going to go right back to Learvo. So you mentioned earlier that you had some skills that you learned, especially in sales, that are helping you out now. Are there any other skills that you learned from past experiences that are really driving you right now and helping you out a ton?
I think at the accelerator program that we were a part of, we learned a lot about customer discovery. I think that's where I probably
Hmm.
first heard that term. And so, I'd
Okay.
have to credit them for that, probably. And obviously, as we started doing it, then I got addicted to it, and I realized the power it has.
Hmm.
Trying to think what else. Yeah, I mean, I think at Minted specifically, I owned the entire e-commerce flow, for all the way from homepage to cart and checkout. And so I think you learn a lot. I learned a lot there about how to work with data, and how to use data to make product decisions. I also learned everything about corporate product management, because at the startup we were just making up the rules as we go. We're trying, and we would bring in people that had some product experience that would give advice, but we were pretty much making the rules as we go. And so I learned a lot about how products should be structured at a company, and using data to make product decisions, how to prioritize, how to work with an engineering team, because I think, yeah, I was working with our co-founders at the first startup, but how to work with a whole team, and specifically an engineering manager, how to, yeah, probably a lot more that I can't think of right now, from that just about product management from Minted. At PayPal, I learned a lot about how to work with a big team, I guess.
Sure.
PayPal is massive.
Mm.
And one of my roles was to work with all the other product teams, to basically be able to how do I put this, localize and globalize their product, right? Because PayPal is a global company. And so they're in all of the languages probably. And so my team helped all the other product teams to easily localize, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
just to put it in simple terms. And so, yeah, just working with all those teams within the company, that was an interesting experience. And I think I also learned that I don't really want to work at a company that big because you're just not making as much as an impact as you could, as you have the, as I believe I have the potential to. And so
Mm-hmm.
those were some great learning experiences. And I also learned about finance. I never worked at a finance company, and so learned a lot about that as well.
Okay. I want to touch back on something you said a little bit earlier. You were mentioning that really the dawn of ChatGPT was when you were able to start Learvo because now the technology was possible. And it's
Mm-hmm.
something where the technology is still evolving, of course, right? So it's something, how do you work with that as a founder when your technology is changing a lot? What does that look like when does your product get better when Gemini 3 comes out? How does that look like as the technology is changing and building around that?
That's a great question. For sure. I think it gets better. I think I would say like if we had more resources, we'd be able to play around with a lot more of the models and tweak the prompts and work with the different models to figure out which prompts with which models work the best.
Mm-hmm.
We can't quite focus on that because also we're still on that journey to product market fit. I don't
Yeah. Okay.
give a false impression of where we're at as a startup. Like we are still trying to figure it out, you know?
Sure.
And so it does get marginally better, but I think there's still more value adds that we want to figure out how we can provide. And so we have a lot of ideas that we just need to pretty much see what sticks, you know? That's part of the startup as well. As much as you validate, as much as you talk to the customers, you still have to execute on the product in the engineering side. So your idea
Mm-hmm.
may be good in theory, but if you don't execute, no one's going to care or no one's going to stick around at least to care. And so we are still on that journey of trying to figure out how to make people care for longer than a day, right? And that's just an example. We have active users and whatnot, but we are still trying to figure out like what's going to make a large amount of users really care and really stick around. And so we're that journey.
Okay. So what does your lifestyle look like as somebody who is doing this full time? You've mentioned having a limited budget. You're on the source of product market fit. You've got a bit of a countdown. What does your lifestyle look like versus what it looked like at corporate?
Yeah, absolutely. I pretty much work all the time, all day, every day. I think it's interesting. I'll find, that it doesn't matter what time it is. Like I kind of just do what I need to in that moment, in that day. So I guess, for example, to add on to that, I guess I try to optimize for time. What's going to be
Sure.
most efficient for me to do in that moment. So, for example, I try to go to the gym at around like 2 or 3 o'clock because it's less packed than if I go at 5 or 6. We also do a lot of, our founding team will do night calls. So, I'll be back from try to get back from the gym for those before 6, 7, 8 before we start those night calls. And so, yeah, I think there is no balance really, I would say. And I don't think people going into startups should strive for that, especially if they're part of the founding team. So yeah, that's what's different about working a corporate role, right? Like you have balance. You can do what you want after 5 p.m. But if you want to be successful, as a startup founder, you gotta be available all the time. And I'm sure, honestly, probably a lot of leadership will say this at corporate companies as well. But I wasn't a C-suite level person, when I was at corporate. So, yeah, that's probably what I would say is like, don't look for balance if you're going to do a startup. If you want balance, don't do a startup.
You're in a unique position where you're building an ed tech software. You've worked in corporate for a little bit. You're a pretty young guy. What do you see as somebody who's really entrenched in all these different fields? What do you see as the future of education and work? I know that's a huge question to throw at you as well. I apologize for that.
Absolutely. So I'll just talk about education because I'd say
Okay.
work is a little different than what we're doing. So I wouldn't say I have as much knowledge there, but in
Mhm.
education, I believe that the classroom will evolve and it needs to evolve. I think the classroom is one of the problems in education. And it's not any one person or type of, like, it's not the teacher's fault, right?
Mm.
You could debate maybe it's the administrator's fault, but it's really kind of the whole system. as a whole. But the problem with the classroom is that there's one teacher and there's 20 to 40 students. And if you get to college, they're right, there could be up to 300 students in a class, and they only teach one way. And most of the time, that those are through lectures, and that's not fun. That's not motivating. That's not engaging, unless they're the best speaker in the world, where 9.9% of them aren't. And so the teacher also has like 50 different jobs. They got to deal with students' behavior. They have to deal with parents. They have to grade. They have to come up with the what they're going to do in their class every day. Just to name a few, I'm sure there's 20 more that I don't even know about. And so and lecturing is one of their jobs. And they're not the best at it. Most of them are not the best at it. And so I believe the classroom will evolve, and so that every student has a learning assistant, a teaching assistant, which will, be a lot of AI, and it'll teach them the way that they learn best. Part of the problem with having one teacher is that everyone's different. Everyone learns differently. Everyone has different interests, different backgrounds, different things that they want to do with their life, right? With the jobs that they want to get out of college, or out of school. They learn at different paces, right? And that's another problem in education. One person gets a 60, one person gets an 80, one person gets 100 on a test. They're all moving on to the same exact thing the next day.
Mm.
And so what I believe the classroom will evolve into is that the teacher will turn into more of a learning facilitator, to where they will direct the AI on what the students need to learn today. And the AI will teach the students in the way that they learn best. And so, there are different types of learners. And I know there is some teacher debate amongst this, and I have my opinions on it. But there's no question for me that I'm an audio learner. I learn way better from podcasts and YouTube videos than I ever did from reading. And that's what I thought this whole time, at least going through school. That's what I thought, that I was a reading learner. And looking back on it, I am a terrible reader. And I'm probably better than I was, but I'm still not great. But I can listen to podcasts on 1.4, 1.5 speed and get everything instantly. And so I believe that there are modalities that students prefer. And that doesn't mean, this is where the learning styles debate comes into place. That doesn't mean that you only have one type of learning style or one type of modality that only works for you. There's probably a lot that work for you. But you just have to figure that out. And I think that's also one of the problems in education, that I didn't realize I was an audio learner until I'd already graduated college. No one ever pointed that out to me. No one ever figured that out. And so I believe that the AI will teach the students the way that they learn, but also related to them, right? So this is a kind of a simple example, but if you had 4 oranges and 3 apples, how many more oranges and apples did you have, right? So if you had that same question, but put in sports terms for someone like me that's into sports, if you had 4 basketballs and 3 footballs, how many more basketballs and footballs do you have? I would be much more engaged in that question. And so that's what I think the classroom and the learning setting will be like, to where the platform that they use, hopefully Learvo, will tailor it to each student in terms of what they're interested in and potentially what they want to do in life, but also to how much they've actually learned, right? And so the platform will understand, okay, Nick is struggling with long division, but he's really good when it's even numbers. And so it won't give them the even numbers, but it'll help you with the long division questions, right? Or it'll just give you more examples. So it'll just really tailor it to what you've learned so far, what you're struggling with, and what you're interested in, and the modalities that work for you, and maybe even improve the modalities you're not as good at, right? Which is kind of partly why the teachers are against the learning style theory, is that you focus on one and you shouldn't use the others. But it's more that you can improve the other styles or modalities that you are not as proficient in. And so that's where I think the future is going. The classroom setting will change, and hopefully that'll evolve kind of just the whole system in general. But it starts with the classroom. It starts with the learning setting. It starts with the students and improving the efficiency of how they learn.
Okay. I think you're very mission driven, which I like a lot. to be honest. I think
Absolutely.
that's really quite incredible. I'm a huge fan of edtech in general. It almost feels like, to a lesser extent, but almost like a democratization of like the Montessori system as well. I think that's something where people like, I've seen charts that's like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, they've all went to Montessori schools, but just being able to engage the student on a deeper level, challenge their thinking a little bit more and making sure that they're able to engage with things thoughtfully is a great step. I like that a lot. Well, okay then. Very, very, very nice. So you've been in startups for, I'll say a while at this point, a
Hmm.
relative while, given your lifespan. You've been in it, you've been engaged at the highest levels full time now, basically full time before throughout the last 7 or 8 years. What would be some of your advice for somebody who's got a great idea, somebody who wants to forge their own path, anyone who wants to be a startup founder? What would be your advice for them? And we'll keep it to tech coding software as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think one thing before I give it my advice is that I think
Mm-hmm.
advice is relative. I think
Of course.
get advice from a bunch of different people and figure out what works
Mm-hmm.
for you. I think there's not one way to be successful. And I'm also still trying to achieve that too. So I wouldn't say I have all the answers. But
Mm-hmm.
my advice definitely, especially in the early stages, is customer discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to customers, talk to users. Don't let go of that even after you have a product.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the core, one of the biggest mistakes that most startups make and still make. And I think sometimes companies are successful in spite of that. And so, sometimes people just, I think companies or ideas are just get lucky and they just kind of hit the jackpot. Go to market is really hard though. I think those successful companies, even if they got lucky with the idea, they
Mm-hmm.
executed on go to market. I think that's something that, again, we're still trying to figure out what is the best strategy to get us the resources that we need to really see our vision through.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to come up with a unique go-to-market strategy that's differentiating. I think you don't have to be as differentiated in your product early on because honestly, if you are, it might mean you're going down the wrong path or you're not
Okay.
solving the right problem. I think having competitors is actually a good thing because one, it means you're probably on the right track, and two, it can push you. It can make you better, right? It can give you ideas. And so I think a really common example that most people know about is Lyft versus Uber, right? They competed against each other. They still compete against each other. And the consumer is better off for it. And so I think kind of
Mm-hmm.
everyone involved, the ecosystem is better off if there's competitors. But don't be afraid of them. Use them as inspiration. That'd be the other thing. Yeah, and I would probably say lastly, the big thing I would say is persevere. There's going to be difficulties. It's going to be hard. Doesn't matter if you're, just starting out or if you have $1 million in funding, there's going to be difficulties. Do your best to persevere. And if you find yourself not being able to persevere, that probably means you're not as motivated by the mission of the company, And so
Mm-hmm.
or what the startup is trying to accomplish. And so follow where your efforts are going. I think that's a popular Mark Cuban quote. Follow your efforts, not your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you notice yourself not wanting to put in that effort, then you're probably not motivated by this mission. And that's okay. I think find what you want to do. Find what you're good at, find what you're motivated by, find the industry that you want to work in and put in the reps. Put in the reps. I think depending on what function you're at, just try different things and don't be afraid of failure. Like don't be I actually encourage my team to fail because if we don't fail, that means we're not trying enough. We're not
Mm-hmm.
trying different things enough. And so, especially from like a marketing standpoint, like at least for my, college level education of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. You're not going to hit on every social media post. But if we are hitting on every social media post, that means we're not experimenting enough. We're not trying enough. And so that would also be, yeah, that would actually be another thing is experimentation. Try different things, experiment with different copy, different colors, potentially different social media captions, different social media ideas. Just experiment as much as you can. If you're passing all of the experiments, that probably means you're not experimenting enough slash like you're not trying out there enough ideas, and probably one of those out, not all of them, but one of those out there ideas is what's going to put you over the edge and get you to that next level. And so just experiment as much as you have the resources for.
I have two thoughts on that. Almost, I feel like we're getting to advice from me at this point as well, towards the end there, especially when you're talking a lot about social media and marketing. So,
Hmm.
one, thank you for that for me. But two, I love the perspective that you're coming from as well, just in terms of where you're at in your journey. I think that it's really valuable perspective, especially because I think it's something where the amount of emphasis that you've added to customer discovery, to doing all this process, I think is really valuable. Stuff that is not something that I feel like that not a lot of things that I see a lot. Thank you for the advice that you bring from being where you are at your own point in life. So it's very valuable. Even if you're saying, you're not necessarily the best person in every circumstance, I think you're definitely one of the best people for somebody out there and for somebody's specific journey. I appreciate you sharing that. Even if you don't necessarily think you're the best person to share that, you definitely are in a lot of different ways. Thank you for that
Absolutely.
perspective.
Thanks,
Okay.
Nick.
Yeah, of course, of course. And this is by no means, I don't bring you on here just so I can just glaze you, but it's something where,
Hmm.
of course I gotta, you're sharing great stuff and I really do appreciate it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. And I have one last thing as well, because you mentioned this a bit earlier, but you were talking about that being in corporate, you now have the confidence that you could go back to corporate. If there were something where it wasn't necessarily, for whatever reason, you decide that you want to go back to corporate, what do you think that path would look like for you as somebody who's been in the startup space for a good few years?
Yeah, I think I'm at the point in my career where I want to work on projects and companies that I believe in, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe in the mission of the company, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm passionate about the field that they are in. And so
Mm-hmm.
I want to pick something along the interests that I have. And
Mm-hmm.
as well, that comboed with a company where I can make an actual difference. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to be that, top person on day one, but I think that there's a path to that potentially, or not,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be the top person. I didn't get into this to be CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I got into this to make a difference. And so, but yeah, it'd have to be a field that I'm passionate about. And so that could mean a lot of things. I think somewhere potentially in product and in the role of product, like improving product development. So, I love a lot of the AI engineering tools, AI coding tools that are out there. And I think that has actually dramatically improved our chances because now I can do a lot of engineering. And so I use Cursor heavily um,
Mm-hmm.
and I am now an engineer, even though I don't have a technical background, and but even and that comes with its own learning lesson too, because now I can somewhat understand what the code is doing. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
syntax, but I can kind of see what it's trying to do. And so
Yeah.
that's also a great learning experience. And so, yeah, so potentially in the role of product or these AI product development tools, that could be a field. Obviously education, that's a field I'm passionate about, and the company that I would join in education potentially would have to be want to change the way education is structured, right, in
Mm-hmm.
some form or fashion. Sports is another field that I'm interested in. Music is another field that I'm interested in. So probably a company within one of those functional areas where I think that I can make a difference and I believe in their long-term vision. Those are at least a few of the examples that I could see myself in.
Well, okay then. Awesome. So we're trying something new today for this episode. Okay. We're gonna
Okay.
do a new segment. Actually, dare I say, the first segment that we've seen on Rerouted thus far. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit you with three questions that I brief answer. Okay. So first question is, what is one experience that shaped what you wanted your career to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to my first startup experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think I got the taste of startups and product, and that's where I want to be. I want to be able to have that ability to make a difference on any given day, and that I can contribute. And so that's why startups and product. I figured out like that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I'm interested in, and so that's the experience I'd say.
All right. Next question. What is one skill that is your secret weapon and how'd you cultivate it?
I would say adaptability, just being able to adapt to different situations. That is something that actually what I would say you need to have to be successful in startups, because things
Mm-hmm.
will change on a dime. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
startups that are killed by Apple and by ChatGPT every year because they come out with those features
Yeah.
and they just have more resources than you do. So being able to adapt to situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
How did I cultivate that? I'm not sure. I think that probably just comes with life experiences. and even honestly the way you're brought up, your parents, and your life in college. I think it's probably something that I've just naturally came, and not I don't mean naturally came to me, but like I worked at it, and I think that is a skill that I ended up having because of my life experiences.
All right. And that final question, what is one piece of advice from a mentor that changed your perspective?
I was trying to think of an answer for this question. I don't know if I have just one piece of advice that
Okay.
really changed everything. Yeah, I don't think there was just any one thing. And I think that I think you should take in advice from all different angles and all different perspectives and really
Hmm.
figure out what works for you. So that's the angle I'm going to take this answer in. I'm not sure if that's the way you meant it, but yeah, I don't
Okay.
think there was any one thing for me, at least, that really changed everything. I mean, the closest thing to it would probably be like, hey, have you thought about product management?
Uh-huh.
So that would be potentially the one thing. Um, but yeah, I just think I would say seek advice wherever you can, right? Like for my personal examples, I follow a lot of the people that I look up to on YouTube,
Mm.
and I go through my YouTube subscriptions every single night before bed. And I save the videos that I want to watch, or I want to listen to later on. And so find the people that motivate you, that spark your curiosity, that make you want to do something and be something, and listen to those people, whether that's a mentor, whether that's a friend, whether that's your parents, whether that's Mark Cuban, whether that's someone that so I like Mark Cuban, so that's the
Uh,
example I'll give. But yeah, whether that's someone who's famous or whether that's your brother, find someone that sparks your motivation and sparks your curiosity and makes you want to do something and follow your dreams, right? Whatever that might be. Have those people around you that allow you to follow your dreams.
Thank you for those answers to those questions. I appreciate it. And I also, too, I do like the spin that you put on that last one. I think it's valuable advice in itself. So thank you very much. Is there any last bit that you'd like to share or anything before we head out? Whether that's promotion or any last piece of advice.
Yeah. I think I covered all the advice I got.
Okay,
Yeah, if you're a student,
great.
check out Learvo. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm just Aneesh at Learvo.com. My LinkedIn as well. Yeah, if you're a student, I'd love to get your feedback on our product. As I mentioned, customer discovery is something I take very seriously. So if you're willing to give your feedback, I would love to hear it. We're always trying to improve our product for students and people that are motivated by learning. If you're someone that is wants to improve their learning, check us out. We'd love to hear your feedback. Yeah.
All right. That sounds great. Anish, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any thoughts, feedback, guest recommendations, or just want to say hi, shoot me an email at nick@reroutedpod.com. If you like the show, leave a review, give us a follow, like, and subscribe. You can find links to our website and socials in the description below. You can also find Anish's email and Learvo's website. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.